Hi folks, you with us today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about Scandinavian, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, all that sort of stuff, cop shows. Now, I saw just a couple of short YouTube vids on one. I think it was a Swedish cop show, but it was kind of super woke. There were bad Nazis everywhere and very good lesbians, that sort of thing. So clearly, it's following the globalist talking points. It's looking at destroying Western society, and so I thought, well, I might just do a little run around, and I don't speak any Scandinavian language, but there's quite a lot of words that are similar to, not the same, but similar to German. So I can kind of work out to some extent what's going on, because they're made for the local market, so they don't have English subtitles. Well, I did find a few that had subtitles, but it sort of follows really the usual propaganda format. Of the first one or two episodes will be quite reasonable. It'll be about cops catching criminals, and the criminals will be your criminals like your murderers and arsonists and robberies and things like that. So, but they very quickly start piling on the wokeism and the political correctness, and so here's some small town come village in the north of, I think it's Norway, and there's hardly anybody lives there, but somehow the town's been overrun with Nazis, and the Nazis are everywhere, and then there's homosexual black people and lesbians. They're the ones fighting back against these Nazis. And someplace in the middle of nowhere, there's black homosexuals and lesbians running around. Yeah, sure it is. So it's clearly a fantasy and nothing more than a piece of propaganda. I assume that they think children are going to be watching it, maybe, or very impressionable adults, younger girls, that sort of thing. So anyway, the propaganda is suddenly starts to pile on pretty thick, and it's almost, the plot is almost inconceivable. There's more Nazis in Norway than there is in the whole world combined, and 3 times over as well. So anyway, having a look at this, and it's a common plot. They introduce black people, always oppressed, and oppressed by evil white people, who are in turn depicted as Nazis. Now somehow these black people end up in Norway and end up Scandinavia, and end up working or going to live in these small villages, and they speak remarkably good English, with an English accent, no less. So I don't know. Having a look at this, I thought, well, this is clearly absurd. So I looked at the script writers and the producers, or the people who are heading up the company or involved with the company that's funding it. So there's a particular organisation the company will be funded by or finance provided by, and this sort of thing. And straight away it goes immediately into Zimmerman, Cohen, Goldberg, Stein. So straight away, and then you sort of look at the streams of funding, and it's from like the front outfits of George Soros, front outfit from the United Nations. So you can see here they're very concerted. It's not an accidental thing that some rogue lesbian was trying to write a show. It's not that. This is very organized. The funding's organized. The people that write the scripts. Now, it's not hard to get online and have a look at the names and what they do. And it's these people are professional agitators. They work for NGOs that are heavily promoting mass migration or lesbian this and LGBTQ that, and so on. So the entire production, script writing crew, and the funding, everything to do with this, are all from the activist groups, all of whom just coincidentally support policies that the globalists are pushing, and their role, or their what these cop shows are doing, is to show how evil straight white males are. The bad guys is always a straight white male. If a female, straight white female, for example, is doing something bad, it's only because the men made her do it. They forced her to do it. She's still a victim. So only the straight white males are the bad guys. Now they use reasonably well-known local actors, men, to front the show. And if you look at the synopsis and what's available online, you'd never guess that it's going to be woke. There's no mention of black lesbians and LGBTQ propaganda. There's no mention of that at all. It's billed and presented just as a straight cop show, catching the bad guys. But again, after the first episode, all the bad guys are Nazis or right-wing this, far right, and fascists, and so on, and straight away, and the sounds like far right extremists, says the senior cops in every show are women. The Minister for Police is nearly always a woman. In fact, it was always a woman, I think, in the clutch that I looked at. They might use the straight white male to front the show, a well-known actor, but that's only to sort of draw in the viewers. If they had the black lesbian as the police chief or the lead police officer, then nobody would watch it, and they have to slip the propaganda in there. They can't make it obvious what they're doing, and again, that technique of let's hook the viewer, then we'll put the propaganda in there. And it's a technique or a methodology, very duplicitous in my view. This is now used pretty much across the world. It's the globalist propaganda playbook. That's how they're going to socially engineer the masses with all this sort of propaganda. But it becomes so. I guess as I'm a bit older, I see it differently. Maybe kids would suck all this stuff up and go, "Oh, that's right, all straight white people are Nazis." Yeah, hey, yeah, that's right, yeah. But I I don't know if anyone can be that dumb, because the thing is so implausible. There's and the one-sided way things are presented too. For example, there's been black people coming from Africa, and they've paid people smugglers. Now, how did you? So, why did you leave Africa? Who encouraged you to do that? Who, with their? Did you go to a refugee camp? Were you a refugee? Or did you just decide you wanted a chance of better life because you saw Swedish soap operas on television or something like that? What was the cause for doing it? Who encouraged you to do this? How much did you pay them? What did you do to get them to bring you to Scandinavia or Sweden or whatever it was in this case? So they could really do a story about people smuggling, about how these black people are really just chances parasiting off the welfare states of Europe and that sort of thing. But they don't. They always present these black people as victims, no matter what, no matter how or why or any of the victims. That's it. So that it's very, it's really thick with ideology, and things are presented very much in the perfect ideological, fantasy picture, so that these nobody who's part of a protected class, blacks, lesbians, and so on, nobody can be presented as being responsible for their own behaviour, responsible for their own actions. They're always presented as victims with no agency, which is, of course, absurd in itself. Now, the other thing, another constant theme is the the straight white males that aren't bad are really bumbling idiots. The women just show them up. And here's one show one I was looking at where his boss is a lesbian and far morally superior than he is, and then he's got to have another young lesbian, looking out for him. Now, it's not necessarily presented that she's a lesbian. She's not bad looking, I guess, but then there's a shot of her at home having a passionate, intimate love moment with her lesbian partner. And if you look at the entire amount of LGBTQ characters, the oppressed black characters, the evil white characters, it's pretty much all in caricature. The white people do the most terrible things, think and say the most terrible things, but there's not a single black person who misbehaves. They're well dressed, well behaved, very sensible, very reasonable. Not one of them. Now, if you look at the reality across whether it be in Britain or London, or elsewhere, the black community commits crimes at 8 times the rate of the. But even to point that out means you're a Nazi. The black, or anybody really coming from a third world peasant culture, they don't fit in very well to the West. And even after generations, they don't fit in well. But again, to even mention that or to want to have a debate about it means that you're a far-right Nazi. So these cop shows, I couldn't find a cop show in Scandinavia, and I spent a bit of time going through it. And some of them had quite a few episodes, so I couldn't sort of watch each one from beginning to end. But in every, I couldn't find one that you'd say was in anything. It wasn't a cop show. It was a platform for delivering anti-straight white male, pro-immigration, pro-LGBT, pro-globalist propaganda. That's all it was. And again, the structure, the script writers coming from the NGOs, the activist groups, the funding, everything. It's very tightly organised, tightly choreographed, and tightly scripted, as we're seeing elsewhere around the world. But it seemed to even be a little bit more in Scandinavia. They seem to be just trying that little bit harder. And there's no pushback from government and no pushback from anywhere. These people just have an open field to do what they want, and they're telling the most terrible lies, and they're given lots of money to do it. You've been with Tassos today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.